Guys, what's going on? I hope you enjoy this podcast. It's just a little bit from the yesterday at the Holistic Chamber of Commerce. They let me come speak there, which was so awesome. Such a great opportunity. So it's a little bit about me talking about how podcasting can help businesses, small businesses, some of the benefits. And then I get into a little bit about where I'm trying to go with my company, the direction I'm trying to go, and that sort of thing. So I think you guys will really enjoy it. Let me know what you think.
Topic came up, the power of podcasting. I immediately thought of Tommie because his brand is Powerful One and his podcast is the Powerful One podcast. It just sort of rung true in my head. But Tommie is one of our instructors, but he also has his own brand, his own thing going, and he's been podcasting for a while now and has a really powerful podcast about how to become more powerful in yourself and in your life and in the community. So it seems like an appropriate topic and an appropriate speaker for what we're trying to do. Tommie?
Sweet. Awesome. Thank you guys so much again for having me. It really means a lot. I love speaking in this type of platform, any type of platform, anytime that I can just help provide value. It seems like when everybody's saying their mission statement, like the common theme is just that a lot of you guys get your fulfillment in your mission and kind of like your inner purpose from like serving others and providing value for others. And so that's kind of where I feel like I am. So just a quick bit about me. 22 years old. I don't love the term entrepreneur because I feel like it's put out, I feel like a lot of people embody that term without really knowing what it means. And so my definition of entrepreneur, which is kind of the main definition, is basically taking greater than normal financial risk to invest in yourself or your business or whatever it is. And I, personally with Powerful One and my podcast and my brand, I have done that. I've invested all my financial assets into my brand, and I really embody everything I'm trying to do at Powerful One. So that's definitely, I do consider myself an entrepreneur. Like Rob was saying, I do have the Powerful One podcast, which is just getting people on who have kind of done things a little bit different, like against the grain, and giving them a platform. It's just basically a normal conversation, but giving them a platform to be able to kind of just speak on what gives them power and what they're passionate about, and just what makes them feel powerful in their one beings that they are. And then, like Rob said, I'm part of Kogan, and that's where I found my passion personally is teaching kids martial arts. When I'm having a bad day, I just go to Kogan and everything's better. It's what I love to do, and so I'm trying to tie that in with Powerful One. So yeah, that's it. A quick bit about me. I'll bore you guys with just the basic details. What is podcasting? If anybody doesn't know, basically podcasting is a series of episodic audio. It can be video. And so that comes in, many different forms. There's tons of different platforms to listen to it on, and so I'll get into that a little bit more. But that's basically essentially what podcasting is. This is kind of what I've put together of why you should begin podcasting. So the first one is just a trend of popularity. I mean, in the past couple years, past couple months, podcasting is exponentially growing. I think it's 51% of people in the United States have listened to a podcast, and of that percentage, 32% listen to it monthly. So it's growing tremendously. So that's one huge reason to get into podcasting. The other, another one is just basically availability and convenience. I mean, we all got these computers in our pocket or on the desk that literally you can access and download a podcast by the snap of your fingers and have it, listen to it. Phone is the most people listen to podcasts mostly on the phone. You listen to it on a computer, anywhere that you can download stuff. And so that's a big thing about the availability and convenience of it is you can listen to them anywhere, you can download it from anywhere. So another reason people should start podcasting. Obviously monetary, we all love making money. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur or anything, small businesses, everybody loves to make money. And there's tons of ways to make money through podcasting. I mean, from advertising is a little bit, it takes a little bit of time to get into the advertising and to start making money that way, because usually you need kind of in the thousands of followers, but there is a lot of basic companies out there that will pay to advertise through your podcast, so that's a way there. The way that I think it's best to monetize for podcasting is literally just, let's say you have an hour-long podcast having a beginning, a middle, and an end segment where you're just pushing people toward your product or toward your service. And basically redirecting them to what you do and what it is that the podcast is for. So there's tons of ways to monetize in the podcast industry, but I always think it's good to start small and start with basically just redirecting people to what it is that you do or what you're providing or what service you're selling. The next is the interaction that's driven, and this goes along with my next one, exposure, but just driving interaction, just having, conversations is such a better way to communicate than just, liking a post or commenting on a post. Having a genuine conversation is huge, and it feels like even if you just listen to podcasts, it's one of those things where you're listening and you're communicating with people. It feels like you're a part of it, even if it's just something you're listening to. Like, you almost feel like you know the people. And so really just like driving interaction between businesses. If you're having somebody else who has a small business on your podcast, the networking that you can provide. They start to, they have people who present their podcast, the podcast to their, their fans or their, group or people that are buying from them, and you can promote. And there's just so much interaction that comes in podcasting that I feel like you don't get as much in other platforms. The last one's exposure. For example, you have a company, you start a podcast, you have somebody who has another company start a podcast, you get all your friends, you get all your clientele, people that are listening, to basically share that, and it just drives interaction. And it's just another reason to start podcasting. I actually have a couple facts here that's pretty interesting. So podcast listeners are much more active on social media. So it says 94% are active on at least one versus 81% for the entire population. So basically people who are listening to podcasts are also interacting on other platforms, other social media platforms. And then this was kind of shocking, but basically 80% of people who are listening to a podcast, starting the podcast, are listening to the whole thing, which is kind of crazy when you think the average podcast episode is about 30 to 45 minutes. It is kind of crazy to think that 80% of those people are actually listening to the whole thing, and listen to an average of about 7 shows per week. So there's definitely space to create, and it doesn't seem like people are just listening to one podcast. People from the the statistics want multiple different podcasts and different platforms and that sort of thing. So I've kind of broken where the benefits lie into 3 categories that I've kind of just thought of. The first is creativity. The part I love about podcasting is there's so much different creative just outlets you can go with it. You can have a Q&A podcast. Like, Kim, for yours, I was thinking, you mentioned like doctors and clients and having, maybe like have somebody on who's got like a list of questions and bring a doctor on. I think there's so many different ways. And the creativity part is kind of subjective, so I feel like there's a lot of different avenues you can go. You can do, question and answer. You could do interviews, family members, clients, stuff like that. There's so many different avenues you can go. So hopefully, as you're thinking about this, I know this is more of like a subjective thing. I feel like the creativity aspect. But hopefully, you guys can start thinking like, if I were to do a podcast, what type of thing would it be? Would it be more of an interview style? Would it be kind of a question and answer? There's just a lot of different paths you can go to kind of create the creativity and make it your own thing. I mean, there's tons of podcasts out there, but being able to create your own thing and make it your own thing is definitely can be unique. So the next is community. I mean, as we know, like Severna Park in general is a really tight-knit community. Like if you guys started whispering about something, 5 minutes later I'd probably hear about it. So we know Severna Park is very close-knit. So that's the cool thing is like, it's such a close-knit community anyway that if you start a podcast, so I'll give you an example. So I don't know if you guys know Gary Vee, but he's an entrepreneur, pretty popular these days. But Gary Vee talks about the popular kid in high school who throws all the parties. And basically what he says is the host has the leverage. So they have the power, so to speak, and basically everybody wants to go to that person's house to party, hang out, have fun, whatever. And so that's the same thing if you are the only person in the community with a podcast, and all of a sudden you start having some people with some small businesses on. All of a sudden you're building basically a community within a community. And the podcasting industry, like I said, with the communication aspect of it versus just the kind of typing aspect, really brings a more community feel. And so I feel like that's a huge aspect of it. It's just, like I said, Severna Park's a small community, making it even a smaller community and having a really good group of people who are, sharing their experiences, stuff of that nature. The last one, which I feel like is the most important one, is just building that connection. And I feel like that comes with the conversational aspect. So, for example, if I was to have a 45-minute conversation with any one of you guys, and I like to tie this into sales just because that's part of what I do. But if we were to have like a 45-minute conversation in sales, we say somebody will buy from you if they know, like, and trust you. And after a 45-minute conversation, I think a lot of us would agree that you could probably get to know me a little bit. I mean, even from speaking, you guys probably feel like you get to know me a little bit, just from 10 minutes. But you start to build a rapport, and basically, like I said, if somebody knows and trusts you, they have a better chance to buy from you. So it's the same thing that helps create that connection, where other platforms like Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn are great, and I think everybody should be on them if you have a business. But I think the cool thing about podcasting is just that communication aspect of like actual dialogue, actual communication, like face to face, and whether you're listening or whether you're having a conversation with somebody else, it's a different type of a way to gather information and a way to connect. And I think the connection piece is really big for podcasting. So this is my little podcast studio I have different guests on. But some of the main things I've learned from podcasting, the first one would just be consistency. I mean, consistency is king in everything, I believe. I just feel like it's important to just be consistent with what you're putting out. And for example, if you go to a food place that always has good food and one day they have bad food, all of a sudden, the consistency wasn't there, you might not go back to that place. So I feel like it's important, whether you're putting out a podcast once a week, once every other week, to be consistent with it, and basically create good content with that consistency. And so that goes into the next one, which is just going to be content. And what I mean by content is creating basically content, like value. So creating value for people. There's one book, and I'm spacing on which salesperson it is, but basically they say people will buy from you on the 11th time that you sell to them. And so the idea behind that is you're providing them value, free content, a bunch of times, and then on the 11th time, the law of reciprocity, you've been giving them so much content, people feel like they have this like inner urge to provide back for you, and so they'll buy your service or listen to your podcast or something of that nature. So I think a big thing is just putting out a bunch of free content and having that content have value. So whatever it is, whether it's putting out a bunch of nutritional information, information on how essential oils can help, sicknesses, stuff like that. Just providing a bunch of free content and information via the podcast, and then just, like I said, law of reciprocity, having that come back to benefit you. And then the last thing would be culture. I think with any business, culture is the most important thing. I think Rob would agree. We have an amazing culture at Kogan, and so the culture that you create with the podcast, just making sure that it's in line with your values and that sort of thing. But I feel like culture is just always a huge component of anything. You always want to make sure you're having a good culture, and so just being able to create that in whatever way you can is something I've learned that's super important. The last thing I'll leave you guys with is just to take action. I started my podcast. I ordered my podcast equipment, and the next day I started it, and I had the idea of it the day before. So the day I ordered the equipment, I had the idea I wanted to start a podcast. The next day I started a podcast, literally filmed it in my bedroom with my phone. So my advice for people would just be to take action. It seems like people are always waiting for the perfect moment to do stuff. I just say take action. If I could have one thing that could stick with this, it would be that tomorrow somebody started a podcast. Not in a week, not in a month. Tomorrow somebody took out their phone, sat down, had a conversation, or recorded an interview, and just started there, and you go from there and you learn on the way. So that'd be my biggest takeaway is take action, be consistent, have good content, provide value, and then just creating that good culture. But that's pretty much all I got for you guys. I mean, I'm definitely be open to taking questions and stuff like that.
You're awesome. I love the name.
Thank you.
22, you're doing freaking awesome.
Thank
it's
you.
amazing. Tell us a little bit about your podcast. What's it all about?
Cool. I'm glad you asked. I didn't want to make this about. I
want it to be about.
Okay, cool. I'm very passionate about podcasting in general. I'm even more passionate about my business, so I appreciate you asking. Basically, so Powerful One is the idea of being powerful in who you are and being powerful in what you do. And kind of the way I grew up, it was very regimented. I was in private school, so it was like go to private school, go to college, get a desk job. It was very like black and white, and I was just I never fit the mold, and so I dropped out of school, and I realized that once I found Kogan and found my passion, I realized that there's other people who need to realize that there's other ways to do stuff other than what the norm is. And so basically what I do now is I have people on the podcast who've done things that are very like against the grain, very different. Whether that's starting your own small business, something like that. And so it's basically people who are in the same spot as me, like they've started something, but it's their passion, it's what they love, it's what they're passionate about. And so I'll just have people on who, like I said, are not famous by any means. They're just starting out, and they have this like mission, like you guys were talking about, and this vision of where they want to go. And so that's where I'm at with the podcast right now.
So it's very much a confidence builder kind of in yourself.
Exactly.
Self-image.
Exactly. It's self-image, just loving who you are, and part of that is like, you know, once you do love who you are, you can step out of the box and find out what makes you happy and what you enjoy and that sort of thing. So it is very much that.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Where do we find your podcast? Because I'm learning that it's on Spotify, it's on
Yes.
Stitcher, it's on, so help me out with that.
That's one thing I actually forgot to mention. I actually had that in one of the slides. I accidentally cut it out, but I wanted to refer to it. I mean, when you upload a podcast, so like when I record my podcast, I just distribute it to one distribution site and it distributes it to like everything. Like people are always like, how'd you get it on Spotify? How'd you get it on? So basically I use this site called Anchor, and Anchor allows me to post it to Spotify. It automatically uploads it to all these sites. Apple Music, Google Podcasts, Overcast, and it takes a little bit of time, but basically what it does is when you upload the podcast, it has the Anchor URL, and then from there it takes a little bit of time, but it distributes it to all the different outlets. And then what I also do is I like to record, so I actually record them. So like personally, when I listen to podcasts, I actually do like to watch them. So I do have the option like YouTube. So there's so many different platforms, but I would say finding like a distributor to go through, I recommend Anchor. I would definitely look into it more. Like I said, I found out that day, so I just looked up, did some research, and then distributed it out from there.
So do you pay for Anchor?
I don't. It's free.
So, and then Anchor just sends it out. Now,
And
if
they-
I wanted to find your podcast,
Oh yeah.
I'm on
What's it
Spotify.
called?
Right, so it's Powerful One Podcast. So
Yeah.
I have my website that's powerful-one.com. What's cool about that is actually something I forgot to mention that's pretty cool, and this goes into the community and the driving interaction thing. But what you can do is I actually have people, my website's kind of finalized, but what I have is people, if they go download the podcast from my website, they plug in their email to be able to download it, and I actually have their email then, and then I can send them.
So you're capturing emails.
So I captured the email, so I can have them on an emailing list. So that's a really good way to do it, is from your website. But I have access to, like, you can just go to my website and listen to it. You can just type in Powerful One Podcast on YouTube, on Apple Music, on Spotify,
So
Google Podcasts.
you need to drive people back to your website because it's good for your website.
Exactly,
just
and
you
so
know.
that,
So yeah, I would drive people there. So powerful-one.com.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. That's freaking awesome.
And one O-N-E, not one.
Yeah, O-N-E, yeah.
So,
Like on a shirt.
so we have ours on YouTube,
Okay,
and I'm not familiar with like all the terms and everything. I have somebody else that helps us with that.
yeah.
So what do you record pictures on to then put it through Anchor?
So I try to do stuff like, I'm so bad with technology, so I try to do stuff very minimalist. So I have a mic, so when I upload to YouTube, I literally record on my phone, edit it on iMovie on my phone, like very little editing, and then just upload it straight from my phone to YouTube. And then as far as the audio goes, I have this little, it's called a snowball, but it's basically this little mic. I record on either iMovie or, do you know what the other one on Mac's called? I usually record on iMovie, and then literally just from iMovie, I export it to like save it as a file, and then from there just go into Anchor, hit upload, and then send it. And like I said, Anchor just kind of funnels it to all
So
the
yours is
different.
primarily voice, not video.
It's actually half and half. Like for example, my most recent one was literally like half and half of the listen. So that's why I think it's cool to give people the option to do both. You know, the good part about obviously like listening is better because you can listen, like I said in the beginning, you can listen
And most people
anywhere.
just listen.
Yeah, most people just listen.
Well, if you have video, then they have the opportunity to do both.
Yes, and that's what I like
And
about
so
the video.
what kind of, what are you trying to capture for audience?
Like what type of demographic type thing, or?
Area and, demographic for age and all of that, but also
I
area.
guess that depends on really what you're going for. I do think it's better to, like you said, start in the community and then from there figure out, because you can always expand from there. But I guess that depends, like what you want your target to be. For me, it's been people just in general in this area. I mean, it's hard to pick. Basically, if somebody in Australia watches the podcast and can take some value from it, that would be great. But so for me, I feel like that's more of a kind of subjective level of what you want the podcast to be. But I do think there's a lot of value in people seeing your face and seeing you talk. And so that's one reason I do like the video a lot too.
But what is your product that you're trying to sell?
Gotcha.
I think that's what she's trying to get at too, with demographics, and who's your best client that you're trying to get from your podcast?
So, good question. I'm also doing speaking at a school that I actually got kicked out of when I was like a can I cuss, shithead, back in high school. And so I'm actually doing a talk at my high school, but I would say my kind of target would be people who don't, like maybe the high school age, who don't realize that there's other options out there for
Like our
them.
suicide guys.
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
school did you get kicked out of?
What's that?
What school did you get?
So I'm from Baltimore County. Kicked out of it's St. Paul's School. It's a private school. I went to private school my whole life, and I only went to public school for 1 year, and it was my senior year.
Your podcast isn't necessarily to bring people to a service or a business. It's really just to add value to them, to their life.
To their life. Edification.
Exactly.
But
I haven't. Yeah, I don't really have, and it sounds crazy.
You
and
don't
I do
have a
think.
product yet.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have like a monetary goal. I just like knew that I had a passion for. I mean, I was having like daily conversations with people that I'm like, wow, I feel like if other people are listening to this conversation, they could like take a lot of value from it. So that's how it started for me, and I feel like that's how it should start from an organic standpoint, where it's not coming from monetary. And if you are consistent, I do believe that stuff will happen if you have the belief. But for me, literally, I mean, I sell T-shirts, but like.
Well, your product actually could be speaker.
Yeah, and that's.
And that's really, if that's what your passion
Yeah.
is, it's connecting with others.
Yeah, and
Which
so
school are you going back and speaking to?
St. Paul's.
St.
And
Paul's.
they let you?
Yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
went there. Yeah, it was like very like eye opening, just because I went back there, and my buddy was actually speaking for King's Vision Day, which is like it was for Martin Luther King, but he was speaking about an incident we actually got in trouble for, and I was there, and I was like, man, like I was looking at all the kids, and I remember like sitting in that space and just being like, you know, wishing somebody would have told me what I feel like I can convey to high schoolers and stuff like that. So I went back and kind of just like squashed all the beef, so to speak, with all the teachers there, and they were like, we'd love to have you come back and talk about stuff. And so I do really appreciate you guys letting me come today, because I really enjoy public speaking, but I am really new to it, so this is still new territory for me, but you know, hopefully there was some value today. Yeah. So I think the beauty of podcasting is that you can funnel it to all the other social medias like so well. I feel like you can market on your other social medias with podcasting, and you can't necessarily do that on other platforms. For example, part of what I do is, like, let's say I take a video clip and I'll put that on Facebook, I'll put that on Instagram, LinkedIn, like everything, put it on YouTube, and like make it a short clip, and it could be something as simple as like clipping this video, you know, why is podcasting beneficial for a business, and kind of market that way, like just market with the content that I'm like putting out, or screenshotting a picture of one of my podcasts and putting it out, or something like that. I don't know if that answered your question, but I just think that the organic marketing, and like I said, like Sonora Park's a small community, and like it was funny. I was at the gym the other day, and somebody's like, I recognized you from the shirt, you know, and so stuff like that. I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, is that kind of what you were referring to?
Well, yeah, it sounds like you just did it more organically. You didn't have like this huge plan on how to, you know, get to the top.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Nike, just do it.
That's like my like embodiment. Like me, like I'll just take like aimless action and just like do stuff, and then whatever happens, happens. And I'm just basing that off of just consistency is the way to go. And if I'm just being consistent with it and putting it out there, then that's my form of marketing. So that's as far as I've gone with that, is literally just like take action, like make a bunch of content. Like I said, all my time is literally invested in Kogan and this. And so when I'm bored, and I enjoy doing it, just, you know, clip a video and market that way. So that's really the only marketing I've gotten into so far with it. Yeah, what's up, Scott?
What's your website again?
Powerful-1, and it's spelled like this, so it's just a dash in the middle.
Powerful1.com?
Yeah, Powerful-1.
They were not very thrilled with him because he shared all these stories about all the hidden nooks in the school where he was and how he got in all this trouble.
Yeah.
But yet the kids were really engaged.
Yeah.
And so for you to be able to do that at a young age, and for the school to accept you back to do that, I think it's really huge.
Yeah.
So,
Private school.
I know, and it's going to be interesting. 'Cause
That private school.
I feel like the same thing's going to happen, because I know that they're okay with me coming back, but I feel like some of the stuff I talk about is going to be not like going against schooling or anything of that nature, but it's just going to be stuff that, looking back, they might be like, oh, it doesn't really go against what we stand for. But I mean,
Lessons that you
Yeah,
learn.
but also
Yeah,
sharing,
Lessons I've learned.
sharing with other people that you don't have to fit the mold to be able to be successful.
Yeah.
You don't, I think that's really big. And one of Buzz Aldrin's reasons for sharing that story was because he said we were always told to do everything exactly the way that we had to, because in space, if we didn't do things exactly right,
Yeah.
something can go wrong. But yeah, I think that's really great.
I love that. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Then he has a question.
Yeah.
What is the best strategy you have to create a following, and both locally and beyond?
I would just say getting whatever it is, so like having people see this like all the time, posting it on YouTube, posting it on Instagram, posting videos, and just getting people to see Powerful One a lot. It goes back to the thing I was saying about like the 11th time. And so my goal is just for people to just keep seeing this and being like, oh, that's a cool logo. Maybe like I'll look into that. And then on maybe the 11th time, they're like, all right, I'm gonna give the podcast a listen.
So basically continue to promote your brand.
Yeah,
That is your brand.
exactly. I do think that's like really important though, to have, because I actually stopped doing podcasts with people who won't promote it, because otherwise it's like, I'm trying to get people of different areas, I've done people from like Odenton, all like in this area, but from different areas, but what I've noticed is like the interaction that I get when people are promoting it on their page. And I mean, like the last podcast I had, the picture in the top, I mean, we had like 100 people literally reach out because she promoted it and I promoted it. Like 100 people reach out and been like, hey, I know I haven't talked to you in 3 years, but this podcast like basically changed my life. And so I think it's so important, like if you are having like one small business has another small business on a podcast, or person to person, like both people, like just promoting that, like both people need to be promoting. But that is like a cool thing, and there's so many different little things you can do like that, like get people to right when it pops up, and that's one thing I'm working on, right when it pops up, like to do the newsletter, or to and just have different ways, and always like funnel it back to your main thing. And like at the end of the podcast, or on YouTube, for example, at the bottom have clickable links. It always is referring you back.
More controlled than that.
Yeah, and so I mean, like by no means am I, like I said, I just take aimless action, and so I'm kind of learning, like as I'm by no means experienced in this stuff, but I feel like I am at a good spot, and I feel like the consistency, like I said, and the content and the culture, those are the three things I've learned are like the most important. And so it's still like a learning process, but it's a cool experience, and just learning all the little minute details about it is pretty interesting. And so, yeah, any more questions, anything like that?
What is your frequency?
Posting?
Consistency, yeah.
So I just got sick and I was in bed for like a week and a half, but it's basically
That
so
kind of sounds like my last.
so I couldn't post, but basically every other week. It's every week, and then but it's basically every other week. I try to get it every week, and if it doesn't happen, every other week. But it's just like anything. I mean,
How many did you have out before you started really seeing growth?
That's a good question. I don't think I saw. I think I saw like a small steady growth until I realized that other people promoting it and me promoting it is what really like drives the growth. Like I said, it just comes back to like that community thing and the connection.
You had at that point?
Probably like 6. Before I really noticed like a big jump when both people started promoting. And it comes back to those two like C's I talked about, like the community that we created just by her posting it and me posting it, and then the connection that drove, and like people responding and like taking so much value from it. And so yeah, probably like 6 episodes in.
Even when you're not posting a podcast, you're posting about your podcast every day.
Yeah. That's a big thing too, is like or posting about this, or posting like a clip from an old video, or doing like I I don't know, there's this guy, Lewis Howes, that does like a 5-minute Friday thing. That let's say you can't, like you can't get a podcast in, take a 5-minute clip from another post that somebody might have missed, maybe it was in the middle of a podcast, and post that as its own podcast and just have it be a 5 or 10 minute clip. So yeah, I mean, I always, like I said, just like I'm trying to get people to just see this, whether it's from the podcast or people wearing the t-shirts or, and then from there, you know, they just get redirected to the mission, to the goal.
Are you on Facebook, Instagram?
I'm not big on Facebook. I'm really big on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah, my Instagram.
It's age.
I think it's
All
yeah.
old people are on Facebook.
Young people are
Snapchat and TikTok.
Yeah.
Find it, I'm not.
TikTok
I
is
don't
so
know
new.
much about it.
I don't know what it is. Apparently it's some kind of video
I don't know
site.
TikTok.
No, I
You're too old for TikTok.
I am. I think I am.
Yeah, because that's the teenagers.
Yeah. It's funny. It's the first time I've like seen that. Like being too old for an app. It's like TikTok. I don't know what's going on.
Great job, dude.
Thank you.
Yeah, seriously, great
Thank
job.
you,
You
that
got a
means a
bunch of
lot.
followers on Instagram too.
I'm trying to
I just followed you. You got a new one.
rock.
You got a new one.
Thank you guys so much for watching this video, or if you're listening on a podcast platform, your support really means a lot. Like I said, there's going to be tons more public speaking events that I'm looking forward to getting involved in with Powerful One. So be sure to stay locked into the channel, like, subscribe, share it. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you soon.